saying, it's such a challenge, I think, that we don't realize when you start to speak about human rights challenges. And the reality is that we have people in different parts of the world. We have different citizens in different parts of the world. And government, obviously, also situated in those countries also because of agreements that they would have. And those agreements being similarly to, if anything happens with regards to government trying to impose something in another country and it doesn't go according to plan, or it does not fulfill the interests of the people that it will obviously affect that are in their country, there are dire consequences. And we see this globally. It's a global challenge. We can make reference, obviously, to, for instance, the people in Islam. They also have the greatest challenge. We know that Afghanis right now, as we speak, are in different parts of the world, and they're also having challenges of being profiled as terrorists because of how they wear their religious regalia and how they get discriminated against. And we see this with xenophobic attacks amongst ourselves as Africans, and how these issues even come to play, whereas we don't understand the political agenda, and we are only seeing it from a point of, oh, this is a xenophobic attack, but we don't understand the underlying issues of where it started, and that is the actual problem. And you're rightfully saying that governments, whom we choose leaders thinking that they're representing us and they're standing up for our rights and they are there to speak and be our voices, because obviously we needed to choose someone to lead and govern. But the nature of that dynamic is that we as people don't have platforms to speak to one another as Africans, as you say, to reach a consensus of what do you think needs to happen in terms of us as Africans. If we come as a South African, I live in Rwanda, what would that be like for me? And if South Africa disagrees with Rwanda on a matter and South Africans in Rwanda get attacked, what does that mean? And how do we solve these issues at that point, which is one of the biggest challenges, because there's a lot of power at play, which makes it dynamically challenging on how do you address such a very difficult situation. And we also know that having too many leaders is a problem or a challenge. So asking everybody for their voices is also a challenge, because we have our own interpretation, we have our own understanding, and we are led by different values, we are led by different principles. And it also brings customs into play, indigenous backgrounds into play. And as Africans faced with this dynamic, how do we really try and work together beyond just our political leaders that we voted for, that have different governing principles that they operate under, whether they are dictators but portraying themselves as democratic leaders, and whether we have activists that have been stripped of their natural powers and they are only there to show face, to be present, to kind of mark a register that they are there. But there are no solutions that are being remedied on the ground. There are still human rights violations that are happening every day in different parts of Africa, in different parts of the world. I would like to ask you a very difficult question. And obviously with all of this in mind, what would you think would be a prospective remedy to this very challenging situation that we as Africans, we as global leaders, we as young activists and people and citizens should be considering in finding a way to create a unified continent? Because we are now living in different parts. As you say, you're in The Hague, and I mean, there are different people from different parts of the world everywhere. And in principle, international human rights work exactly on that aspect of there are treaties that government enter speaking about the protection of vulnerable people. So vulnerable people being people placed in different countries, whether they're seeking asylum or they are refugees. And when those countries don't fulfill their part, what are we supposed to do? How do we even begin to remedy such a complex situation? From an academic point of view, we can write about them, we can speak about it, and we can make it known, and for there to be a historical blueprint of this is what has been happening. And then from a political point of view, we have people who are in the forefront as journalists speaking on this subject, but some of them have been silenced, whether being imprisoned, whether being threatened, whether having to flee for their lives. And in other aspects, we also have people who have been displaced, where there are wars and no peace in their countries, and they're having to find refuge in other states. And then in those other states, maybe some of them don't want them there. And then the principle of Ubuntu then is in question, because they're feeling we already are overpopulated, we have our own problems, you're bringing them to us. How do we resolve these very complex issues? And I know I said a lot, but in principle, the question is, what do you think could be a solution to these very complex situations? Based on your experience, based on your research, and based on you as an individual who has just been on a very long journey of advocating for human rights on a global scale.
Yeah, it's a very complicated question, but in very few words, I can say that African people, mostly youth, they have to stop being naive. So they have to understand that their future, they are the master of their future. Nobody should decide for them. So that is how I see. So how to make it? It's this I've been talking about. People's solidarity. People's solidarity. We need unity among people. So people in South Africa should know how people in Rwanda live. Just not to understand like a very far context. So, for instance, I try to follow what is happening in South Africa. I'm not South African.
Valentin.
But, you don't understand me?
Valentin.
Yes. Understand you.
Yes, would you please repeat it? Because our network gets disturbed.
Oh.
Yes.
So
you were saying.
Don't... Okay.
Yes, please repeat the answer. Sorry.
Okay. Yes. I said African people should stop being naive. They should understand the necessity of having these people's solidarity. It was it should be their life engine. Life engine. Solidarity. We need to work together. We need to know each other. We need to understand each other. Politically, I think it's time for African people to commit to come together and forge a force, a political force, an African political force that could be like, let's say, a laboratory that produce our politicians. For instance, South African people should know who will read in DRC, who will read in Burundi. We should know them. And be sure they will work for the African interest, because if there is a problem in DRC, no matter what, people in South Africa will be affected in one or another way. If there are problems in Uganda, in Tanzania, people in Cote d'Ivoire, in Tunisia, they will be affected. So
Yes.
I think it's time for African people to come together, mostly young people, to come together and grow or create this kind of laboratory to produce our future leaders. And we can know those who want to go in political offices, different political offices. For instance, in Malawi, people in South Africa know them. People in Rwanda know them. So being concerned on what is happening in every African country. And it will be possible only once we can come and work together. I see here in Europe, people in Netherlands are always being interested to know people who will read in Belgium or in France or in Germany. So this should happen also in Africa. And political parties form networks. So it's young people, young African people can also create their political networks and work together. For instance, there are young people in South Africa. They can start working with people in Tanzania, in Rwanda, in Uganda. Young MPs come together and unite. So then they will be a political force in Africa, and then we can push decisions, we can influence decision-making in Africa. If one wants to run for a political seat, other people in Africa come behind him and support. So I think that is the way we can make change in Africa. And a lot of things can be changed.
Yes. Thank you for that, Valentin. I know it was a difficult question, and it's very complex, and the nature of Africans has always been Ubuntu, and seeing it through has been challenging because we are disconnected in a sense that we have challenges on the ground with the Anglophone and the Francophones, and we know the complexities of that dynamic. And we also know that different customs in Africa also play, customs and religions play a very big role in separating us to having equality. When we speak about gender equality, and it's a challenge. And we are also during the phase of transition of hoping that there will be women, more female leaders, and they will be embraced. And I think if the young people of Africa, as you suggest, were to wake up and arise to the occasion and change the narrative for themselves, it would make a world of difference. And with that said, I really love the way we have been able to dissect human rights subjects from a Rwandan perspective, but also incorporating different parts of Africa and the global community that gets impacted and affected. It is so important for us to always remember that even though it is complex, it doesn't mean it's impossible for us to achieve these goals. And with that said, I would like for you to just indicate one last wording that you'd like to share with everyone about your experiences, about what you want everybody to keep in mind, apart from the youth engagements that you want them to remember, but for you to be able to just share your last words in our engagement for today, and not the last for other progressive programs that we'll have, but for today, what is the highlight that you want to have people remember you by? And how do people also get in touch with you if they want to have engagements with you, and maybe start to get a clearer understanding of how they can make a difference in Africa, specifically based on, I know that your research is based on the principle of Rwanda, and how the changes need to be embarked on. And you're speaking on that principle. And if we have young people with conviction of how to go about that, and they just want to speak to you about their ideas or their radical movements and what they want to do in changing Africa or the world, please just share with us those final words and imparting of wisdom.
Yeah, I simply say Africa is the future. Africa is the future, but we have a one common enemy. That is the African selfish politics. That is the problem we have. And youth people, young people, should work on changing that. So if we really want to be the Africa, to be the changers of Africa, we need to start thinking how to change our political management in Africa. And that is the job or the mission which can be undertaken well by young people. Because everywhere politicians manipulate young people. They are a force, but they are vulnerable. They don't have money. They need to live. So they are easily manipulated. But the time they will understand, those politicians work only for their interest. So then young people we realize that they are only, how to say it, they are only masters of their future. They can do things themselves without relying on those politicians. So that is the mindset change that should be installed or established in the thinking of African people, mostly young people. That's what we need. Maybe we can keep working on it together. Everyone in his capacity, whether big, high capacity or small, little capacity, we don't know, but everyone can do something.
Thank you very much, Valentin, for that. I think a lot of young people have a lot to reflect on, and with your encouraging words, we can make changes that would not only affect us, but the next generation to come. And I want to thank you for your time and the imparted knowledge you've shared with us on the importance of human rights issues in Africa, but also from the Rwanda citizens' perspective and the challenges that they have encountered and what needs to happen moving forward with the type of leadership we need to be looking into and the things we need to apply our mind on. And with all of that very rich knowledge that you have managed to impart and share and guide us on your views of these challenges and just enlightening us on the importance of being a youth that is alert, a youth that arises to the occasion, and a youth that is not naive to the reality of decisions and the power we have to changing our narrative. The narrative of the limiting beliefs, the lack that we face, and how we as our young Africans can start to change, not just the continent, but the world, by being in alignment with our purpose at the end of the day, because that's what it speaks about. And I just want to say thank you for your time. I know that we have walked this very long journey, and your ability to explain these processes, even though English is not your first language, we really appreciate you. And we want to say thank you for the work that you continuously do, that you do with conviction, and that you are tireless in helping Africans understand that we are the solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.